Salvete, children. It is I, your Magister, the Big Cheese, Cassius Maximus, and Jugzilla, here to present you with another exciting video lesson. In this one, we're going to be talking about the calendar. Now, we've already covered the days of the week in class. And remember that the Romans had 7 days in the week just like we do, with very similar names, even though our names are derived from Viking mythology. And they had a random 8th day that just made everything confusing. Well, our next lesson is going to be talking about the calendar and the months. And if you're really smart, you would figure that the one after this is going to talk about the years, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's start with the first Roman calendar. The first Roman calendar is the calendar of Romulus. Now, you'll notice here I had this lovely picture of here the two cute little naked babies and the mommy wolf, and they're having breakfast. My guess is that this little guy is Romulus because he's being a little bit more aggressive, but it really doesn't matter. Naked babies are cute, and you can be whatever they want. They're twins. You can figure it out. So this is the calendar of Romulus, the first king. You have Martius, the first month of the year, Aprilus, Maius, Junius, Quintilis, Sextilis, September, October, November, December. So if you'll notice here, you have 31 days, 30, 31, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, for a grand total of 10 months with 304 days. Now, even those amongst us who are mathematically challenged, if we just do a little bit of thinking, you will notice that the year is approximately 61 days off. That's a little over 2 months, give or take a few days. Now, to compensate for this, the Romans had a random series of months that weren't really months. Is that confusing? You're darn right it is. Now, let's start with some basic stuff here. If you will look here, the first month of the year is Martius, which shares the same root as our English, the day of the week for Martes, but it's March, and it's named after Mars, the god of war. This was the first month of the year because it was the planting month, as Mars was also the god of planting for the Romans. So we went from Mars, Aprilus, Maius, so April, May, Junius, June, Quintilius. There's an original name for a month. It literally means the 5th month. Sextilis, and it's funny, yes, it's always funny, literally meaning the 6th month. September, 7th, October, 8th, November, 9th, December, 10th. So you'll notice sex, so actually it's quinque, sex, septum, octo, novem, decem. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now the question may come up in your mind if you are at all thinking or just randomly staring off into space looking at dust bunnies, why are we in the month of October? And October is the 10th month and not the 8th. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. So how do you deal with the fact that there are only 10 months and 304 days when there's actually 365 days in a year? Well, there's a couple of things with this. Number one, the calendar is a lunar calendar, which means it's based on the cycles of the moon. And this helps explain why it's just so weird and funky. The moon does not keep regular cycles in the same way that the sun does. Sun comes up, goes down every day, follows a regular pattern. Moon, sometimes you have 2 moons in a month, sometimes you only have 1, sometimes it comes early, sometimes it comes late. It's darn confusing, and having a lunar calendar doesn't work well, but that's the way that it was. So the calendar of Romulus was set up with this idea that somewhere between December and Martius, so where we would have January and February, there are approximately 50 to 60 days of winter that didn't count for anything, and it just kind of floated there. They really didn't, and sometimes they would change. Sometimes it would be more, sometimes it would be less. So what ended up happening was every 10 to 20 years, the Romans would find themselves a month to 2 months, even 3 months off of what the normal calendar should be, and they just had like a glut of random extra days that were just thrown in there. Now, anybody in their right mind would realize this is an incredibly inane and stupid system. Why would you keep doing it? Well, eventually they stopped doing it. But when the king creates the calendar, you don't stop doing it until after he's dead. Why? Because he's the king, and he'll kill you. Not a good thing. Now, to make matters a little bit more confusing, Romans did not use days like we do. So, for example, I'm recording this on October the 7th. They would not have had October the 7th. The first day of the month was called the Calendae, which is where we get our name or word calendar. Notice even the similarities in the way that it's pronounced or spelled out here. That's the first day of the month. You have the Nonai, that's the day of the half moon, and the Idus, or is more popularly known, the Ides, which is the day of the full moon, and technically around the middle of the month. All the days of the month are numbered using these three specific dates. So, for example, the first day of the month would be the Calendai of October. The day that we would be on right now, the 7th, would be the 7th day since the Calendai. When we hit the Nonai, it would then be the Nonai of October, and the days would begin counting over again. The first day after the Nonai of October, the second day after the Nonai of October, the third day after the Nonai of October, etc., etc., etc. When you come to the Idus, or the middle day, it then switches again, and you start counting backwards. So after the Idus, it would then go, it's 14 days until the Calendai of November. Yes, it's really confusing and whacked out, and this is one reason why they eventually changed the calendar, because that's just hard to keep track of. So enter this handsome fellow. He's got kind of big pudgy jowls, and those eyeballs just kind of stare at you. This is Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome, who is generally credited with giving Rome its religion, its practices regarding how it's going to set up and organize itself, as well as fixing and creating a more decent calendar. This is the calendar that he created. He began the year by assigning the random months in winter to actual months. Januarius, named after Janus, the god of doorways, with his two faces looking forward and looking back, and Februarius. So he threw these other 2 days in. Now, if you go through here and do some basic math, let's see here, 29 and 28 is 57, that's 88, 108, 117, 128, 140, 157. Oh my gosh, there's just so many numbers. I'm getting confused. In any case, if you go through and count all these things, you'll see that it's much closer to the 365 days that we actually have right now. It's still slightly off because it was still a lunar calendar, but it works much better. And under Numa Pompilius, things made a little bit more sense. Now, the original idea is that the beginning of the year fell at the planting month, Martius. So, this was still the first month of the year, second, third, etc., and then these were the last 2 months. Eventually, that got switched around by Julius Caesar. But, at least for the time being, the early Roman calendar that we're looking at, this accounts for the shift from a 10-month lunar cycle to a 12-month lunar cycle. The calendar of Romulus, once again, happy little naked baby with the wolves, 10 months, 50 to 60 random days of winter that are just kind of thrown in there, and the numbering system based on the Calendai, the Nonai, and the Idus. The calendar of Numa Pompilius, based on a 12-month cycle, with a little bit more on the days here, and somebody can do much better math than I can because I got sick after 151, or 157, or 150 something, or whatever it was. They still, however, did not actually number days the same way that we would. It would still use the same system of referring to the Calendai, the Nonai, and the Idus. So that's the end of part 1. Then we're going to hit part 2, looking at the reforms in the calendar that make it a little bit more comprehensible, as well as how it is that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 end up becoming other months, because I can't just think of it now. Okay. Wale